Hi everyone, my name is Helen. First, I would like to do the acknowledgement of the country. We acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the land we meet. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and future. Today, I'll be discussing the effectiveness of the child protection laws, policies, and acts towards protecting children from family and domestic violence. In my presentation today, I'll be touching on the impact of family and domestic violence on children and young people, some of the programs used to improve children and young people's protection, the National Framework for Protecting Australian Children, 2009-2020, the Children and Young People's Care Protection Act 1998, and also Advocate for Children and Young People Act 2014. Children and young people who are from families that are exposed to domestic violence grow up in an environment that's unpredictable. They are normally exposed to tension, leading to a life filled with anxiety and dominated by fear. This can trigger emotional and psychological trauma, risk of physical harm, direct or indirect victim sexual abuse, child abduction, and so on. All of this can later impact on the child's everyday life and decision making. According to Australian Domestic and Family Clearinghouse 2011, 1 in 4 children are exposed to domestic violence. Despite all this, there are policies and laws and programs and services available to protect children and young people exposed to family violence. Each year, around 3% of all children aged between 0 and 17 years of age are supported by Australia's Child Protection Services. Some children are unable to live safely at home as they may be at risk of being abused or neglected by their parents, or sometimes their parents just don't have the capacity to provide adequate care. Children and families may receive support services to keep children with their families, or sometimes become subjects to investigations of reports of child abuse, neglect, protection orders, and/or placement in out-of-home care such as relative or foster care. In Australia, state and territory governments are responsible for statutory child protection. Each responsible department assists vulnerable children who have been or are at risk of being abused, neglected, or otherwise harmed, or when parents cannot provide adequate protection. Departments are responsible for child protection investigation, process, and oversee the management of child protection cases. Children and their families are assisted by being provided with or referred to a wide variety of services. The national recurrent spending on child protection and out-of-home care services was 4.8 billion in 2017 to 2018, which shows a real increase of 463 million from 2016 to 2017. This continues a pattern of increased spending over the past 5-year period, averaging an annual increase of 268 million between 2012 to 2013 and 2017 to 2018. Child Protection Intake Services screen incoming reports to determine whether further action is required. Reports that are deemed to require further action are generally classified as either a family support issue or a child protection notification. In New South Wales, we have the Department of Family and Community Services, which collaborates with the government, non-government, and community partners to work with children, adults, families, and communities to improve lives and realize potential, with their main focus being breaking rather than managing disadvantage. With facts mainly being at the forefront of child and young people's protection, there is a huge overlap and division and uncertainty when it comes to services, programs, and activities available to protect children. Some of the effective programs provided by FACTS includes the primary, secondary, and tertiary intervention programs. Primary intervention aims at preventing or stopping abuse before it happens by targeting members of the community through broad-based programs to raise awareness of the problem and provide support through service programs such as National Child Protection Week, which is normally promoted by the National Association Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, or personal safety programs which are conducted through schools and groups in many parts of Australia. Secondary intervention is the process of early recognition and response to the challenges faced by the child or young person in order to decrease the harm or abuse that may occur to them due to family violence. Secondary intervention services are put in place to improve the welfare, well-being, and safety of the child, young person and their families. This also prevents the development or emergence of problems and issues in these families. The difference between the two is that primary interventions are normally universal and are accessible to all the community members, where secondary interventions are mainly selective, meaning that these are provided to families that are already at risk of family violence. Next up, we have some examples of primary intervention services. The next slide will also just show you a couple of secondary intervention programs available in New South Wales. One that really stands out for me is the Brighter Futures program, which has a specific eligibility targeting families that are most suitable for involvement in the program. And lastly, tertiary prevention is also known as the intensive and specialist prevention services, and it refers to the intervention that happens to help those who have already been abused with the aim of preventing its recurrence, and it's the responsibility of the state and tertiary governments. An example of tertiary includes out-of-home care, which happens when all avenues have been exhausted, and this is by putting children in a care of someone who has capacity to make sure that they care for the child without the child being exposed to abuse, and court orders have to be issued for this to happen. The effectiveness of these interventions, according to facts, is that these interventions focus on person-centered approaches. They protect and promote the community and social participation through education and raising awareness against domestic violence. They foster an organizational culture from the top down, which supports respectful attitudes and relationships between the staff, the person, and their family. These also implement a clear internal feedback mechanism, which provides the person and their family with opportunities to communicate what may be working or what may not be working for them. And mainly, it also addresses the barriers that prevent the person or the child and it also supports staff from identifying and reporting abuse and neglect in due time. Another framework that is useful and has been proven to be effective is the National Framework for Protecting Australia's Children 2009-2020. According to the New South Wales Health 2018, the National Framework for Protecting Australian Children 2009-2020 is a long-term national plan that is used to tackle child abuse in Australia. This framework is also reviewed after a couple of years. The framework has aided in reducing child abuse and also neglect towards children and young people. The effectiveness of the framework is that children receive support to find appropriate accommodation and also get support to remain in their homes. This framework has proven to be effective as it allows children to also remain in their homes, and also if that's impossible, they are able to get support to find an appropriate home for them. Children are able to also report abuse, also maintaining privacy and confidentiality. Children are also able to have a say in what accommodation or care they may receive. When it comes to Indigenous children and young people, they can receive support to be safe and also improve their health and well-being. And all these supports take into consideration the cultures, languages, and principles for each individual. This is just a diagram to show you how the framework works in incorporating culture, language, principles, standards, and values. And this framework also promotes that protecting children is everyone's responsibility. The next law I'll be discussing is the Children and Young Persons Care and Protection Act 1998. This act establishes the legislative framework governing children and well-being and providing child protection and out-of-home care services in New South Wales. This act also supports out-of-home care for children or young people exposed to ongoing violence. This act was also part of the acts that supported mandatory reporting, which has also improved the response towards children exposed to violence. Reporting has to be done through the right channels to allow the correct or appropriate help to be provided to each individual. Section 27A of this Act provides an alternative reporting process, which includes the introduction of child well-being units. Child well-being units establish the role of assessment officers, and they operate in 3 different government agencies, which are Department of Health, Department of Education, and New South Wales Police. The Children Wellbeing Unit can assist with mandatory reporters within their agencies in determining whether a report does or does not meet the significant harm threshold. And if the report falls below the new threshold, they provide advice on the ways that families can receive the level of local help that they need. A truly shared approach to child protection means better information shared between agencies involving the safety, welfare, and well-being of children and young people. This act has proven to be effective as it allows each individual to maintain their culture, disability, language, and also maintain privacy and confidentiality for each person. It also offers an option of a safe and stable out-of-home care. The Act also caters for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and the principles that this Act follows is that it makes special provisions relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and families. And these principles focus on self-determination and participation in decision-making for the Torres Strait Island and Aboriginal children and their families. It gives an opportunity for them to participate in decision-making about the individual of the child who's an Aboriginal in the context of child protection, including the decision to remove a child or young person from the care of their parent or caregiver if they seem to be at risk. Other parts of this Act include the care applications and the Children's Court, which leads to children getting support to get provided services of out-of-home care support, and also background checks for people working with children, for example, the Working with Children's Check. Lastly, the final act that I'll discuss today is the Advocate for Children and Young People Act 2014. This act stands for children and promotes their health and well-being in supporting children and young people in being part of decision-making over their lives, and also enabling them and other organizations to cooperatively work together to represent the interests of the children and young people. This act also conducts and promotes and monitors research into issues affecting children and young people, and also makes recommendations to the government and non-government agencies on legislations, reports, policies, practices, procedures, and service affecting children and young people. And this act is very effective in the sense that it allows children to still remain safe in their homes, knowing that they are protected by the law. This is a public health model which shows a different approach to prevention, emphasizing mainly on primary prevention to prevent abuse and neglect occurring. It seeks to involve other professionals, families, and wider community, enhancing the variety of systems that can be used to protect children, and recognize that protecting children is everyone's responsibility. Below are the statistics of the children receiving child protection services. If you look at the statistics, we can see that children admitted to out-of-home care in 2018 2019 was 12,223, and those that were discharged were 10,733, which goes to show that whatever laws or procedures are being followed by family support services is allowing children to eventually move back to their homes and to receive that support that they need. Based on the statistics below, I would like to believe that the laws, policies, and acts provided by the Australian government have proved to be very effective in areas like the city or in well-developed areas across Australia. However, in areas like the rural areas, I believe that there's still room for improvement, and that if organizations continue to work together, there will be a decrease in family violence towards children and young people. I've come to the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening.